people who are listening, Surbhi, where in the world are you right
Where in the
now?
world am I? I
Where in
am
the world are you?
currently in London,
Okay.
and I've been here for
And
about 5.5, 6 years now, nearly 6 years.
and you moved to London right after university, or
No, so I moved
not?
to Oxford right after university. I was in Oxford for a
Mm-hmm.
couple of years. Then I moved up northeast in the UK to Durham for a year. Then I
Mm.
moved to the Middle East for 18 months. And then I moved back to the UK, and I've been in London ever since.
Ah, got it, got it.
So
So most of your time after college has been in the
has been,
UK.
yeah, 10 and a half years of being in the UK or the UAE.
I see. And what is your scorecard for the UK so far? What do you like the most, and what do you like the least
Ooh.
about?
So
Maybe London,
UK,
since you've been there for a while.
yeah, UK instantly felt like home, which was really
Hmm.
surprising. Um,
Why?
I don't think I felt at home. I've never felt at home as much as I've felt at home here. So
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know what it is. I don't know whether it's like a level of independence that I don't feel in Delhi, or
Hmm.
whether it's just a freedom of like movement. And like it's
Hmm.
got nothing to do with family pressure. It's got like my parents are really chill. They're not chill about
Hmm.
me going out alone in Delhi, possibly. But other than that, like they're really cool. So I have absolutely no problems there, and it's never been an issue.
Yeah.
But I think there's just something about the UK that's always just felt like home. And I like the first couple of years in hindsight were really difficult. I don't think I realized it as much while I was here.
Hmm.
Um, Oxford's a completely different world when it comes to like studies and the way they deal with things,
Yeah.
the amount you have to learn academically, but also just realizing how much I had to I think I just took a step back and kind of watched people rather than like throw myself into social situations. I also made the conscious
Hmm.
effort of like not falling into the trap of just going with people I knew. So I knew a whole bunch of people who were moving to the UK at the same
Hmm.
time as I was. One of my
Yeah.
closest friends was at LSE. Vrinda, Kopal, everyone was in London. There
Hmm.
were a few people from Stephens at Oxford around the same time. So I was like, it's really easy for me to just have those people around me constantly because
Yeah.
it's comfortable. But I made sure that didn't happen as much.
Hmm.
I mean, I was in touch with, obviously, I was seeing all of these people who I was close to at Stephens and like people I was
Yeah.
close to generally. I was seeing quite a lot, but I wasn't hanging out with anyone at Oxford who I
Hmm.
knew on a regular basis, which just meant that I had to take a step back and just watch people and kind of learn how to fit in again almost.
Hmm.
So people who knew me at Oxford, when they see me now, they're like, "You're a completely different person. You were really quiet
Hmm.
then. You weren't like, you didn't say things the way you say things now. Like they just have a completely different perception of me." And I don't think I realized how much of a difference there was in my personality at the time.
Hmm.
So that was an
What do you
interesting
think
couple
is
of
the biggest?
years.
What do you think is the biggest difference on your personality?
I've just opened up. I think
Hmm.
I just become more outgoing. I was never super outgoing, like even at Stephens, but I was always
Yeah.
social. At least in like class, everyone knew me. I knew everybody. I was class rep. I was um, history president. So it wasn't like I was not social at Stephens, but I think coming here, I completely shut down to some
Hmm.
extent. So I've gone back
Do
to
you know
being
why?
uh, just figuring myself out. I think
Hmm.
social cues, figuring out where
Hmm.
you kind of how you like interact with people here. People here are very different from us. Like
Hmm.
I think Indians tend to be, or at least being growing up in Delhi, as like you're very loud. You're very you don't think before you speak sometimes. At least I didn't.
Okay.
People don't like that here. If you tell people, "Oh, you look really unwell," like they'll take offense to that.
Oh.
That's not you saying you look really unwell out of concern. That's you
Yeah.
going, "You look like shit." So they take
Yeah.
offense. Like so, learning these little cues, you're like, "Oh, I
Hmm.
can't say certain things. I have to just kind of, I'll
Yeah.
just shut up. I'll watch people and I'll see how people interact, and maybe then I'll be a bit more comfortable talking to people." So the
Got
first
it.
2 years were like that, but still it didn't feel uncomfortable. And then I think I had the
Hmm.
best time in Durham. Moving up there, I just had such a blast. It's a tiny, tiny town. Like it's just a university centered town. It's in the middle of
Yeah.
nowhere. Um, I don't know how much you know about the Northeast here, but like their accents are funny. They like
I
I've
don't think
picked
you're
it
allowed
up.
to say that either.
I am because I've picked up the accent. Like people
Oh,
here now
okay.
go, "Oh, you sound Geordie." I didn't do it
Jody.
consciously, but it like comes out. Yeah, exactly. So they call Geordie
Oh,
accents up there,
okay.
and they're just so friendly up
Hmm.
there. Like you'll be walking along the road and 10 people will turn around and say hello, good morning, how are you doing to you. Nobody does that in London.
Hmm. But
So there's a huge
do
difference.
you respond? Like I remember
Yeah,
this is
yeah,
vividly.
yeah.
I remember this. I was in the US, I think, and I think I was crossing somebody in the hallway, and they're like, how's it going? And I was like, oh, it's going well. Like, thanks for asking. But that guy already walked past.
Yeah.
So it's like, did you even ask me to like hear my reply or not? So is
So
that the
here,
same?
it's not like a conversation starter. So you're not going to stop
Hmm.
and have a 10-minute conversation with these people, but you
Yeah.
will respond. So you will say,
Oh,
I'm okay,
okay.
how are you? Or like just, if they're saying good morning, you will say good morning back or like
Got it.
smile
And what
back
if
at
you
people.
replied like, I'm really sad? Like, what do you think would happen?
That's also against social etiquette here. You're not allowed to
Oh,
do
it
that.
is.
So
Oh
like,
shit.
how are you doing is a hello here. So you don't actually respond to that question or you just say, I'm fine.
Oh
Again,
man.
something you have to learn. So
Maybe
yeah,
you should test it out next time you go
just
up to
someone,
Durham. Just be
anyone.
like,
Yeah.
I'm not happy
I'm
today.
really, really sad today. I don't think it'll go down very well. I think they'll just walk away. So
Oh
Durham
shit.
was amazing.
Okay.
I think I learned a lot. It was just really easy, and the course I was doing, I really enjoyed. I was a
Mm.
very hands-on museum-based course, which I was like, this is exactly where I
Mm-hmm.
want to be and what I want to do. And when I moved to, so I moved from like not a very, so Delhi is huge. Then I moved to
Of
Oxford, which is
course.
tiny, which I was like, I love this because I can walk everywhere, I can cycle everywhere. I don't have
Yeah.
any like restriction of where I'm going, what time I'm coming home. Mostly everything feels safe. Then I moved up to Durham, which is like an even smaller bubble.
Oh.
And I don't know how much you know about Ras Al Khaimah. Dubai feels
No.
huge. Rak's like tiny. And again,
Mm.
like I had my car, I could drive there, so it wasn't particularly restricting. And whatever said and done,
Yeah.
like UAE is really like fairly safe.
Yeah.
So I moved back to London, and I'm like, oh shit, why have I made this move? Because this is huge. It's overwhelming. So
Yeah. But
first two
well, you've
weeks
been here
of
for 5 years.
I've been here for 5 years. First 2 weeks were like I don't know what to do with myself because this place is so big. But now I'm
Yeah.
like I can't see myself anywhere else other than London because it's such
Wow.
a fun place to be. You've got everything at your doorstep. There's so much going on, and when you don't want to do anything, there's like enough green spaces that you can just kind of take yourself
Yeah.
on a walk. Um, it's a it's such a diverse place as well that you don't feel like there's no way you'll feel out of
Mm.
place.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, London's
But
been
what do you like the
really
least about
interesting.
London?
uh what do I like the least about London? I think how expensive it is. It is
Yeah.
expensive. It's probably my
Yeah.
least favorite thing about London. I'm moving anywhere
And
outside of like London would just help so much more in terms of finances.
mm,
So it's a very and I'm making the very interesting choice of living in London and commuting out of London, which no one does, because I am
yeah.
spending money in London and then working
Yeah.
outside of London. But I'm doing it because, like, when I first made the choice, it was logical. I was studying at UCL, so I was based in London. I
Mm-hmm.
was working part time, so I wasn't having to commute as much. And then
Yeah.
when the job turned full time, I was like, for my own mental health, I'm going to stay
Mm-hmm.
in London for the time being. I've got like a good support system here. I've got friends and like really close
Yeah.
friends around. And moving to a place like Milton Keynes is probably not going to be the best for me. And then the pandemic
Yeah.
hit, and I was like, no, no, this is definitely true. I am not moving out to London anytime soon. I'll probably
How
quit that
far is
job in
Milton
like,
Keynes?
so it's 70 miles
How
outside of
far?
London.
And how long
So
does
it
that take
takes
you
me
to
about 35
commute?
minutes on the train.
Oh, not
And
too
like,
bad.
this is not train as in tube train. This is like trains going
Oh,
outside
intercity
of,
trains.
yeah, exactly. So it takes me about
Okay.
35,
Okay.
40 minutes on the train. It's not like my commute's not bad. People have got worse commutes
Yeah.
within London, but
Yeah.
it's expensive.
Okay. So we touched upon a bunch of stuff on what you've been up to, but for people who have maybe not been in touch with Surbhi or don't know or haven't stalked her on LinkedIn, here's a quick rundown. And Surbhi sent me a voice note before we got started. So Surbhi and I studied together. She studied history. This was 2010 to 2013. You then went to Oxford to do an MPhil in
Yeah.
anthropology, archaeology,
No,
uh,
archaeology.
archaeology, all the ologies, for about
Yes.
2 years. That's when you sort of realized, or you started moving towards like doing museum, like a work in the broad like space of museums. You then went to do a master's in museum and artifacts at Durham, and we talked a little bit about your the good old years at Durham. Started working at museums there, like part time, and then eventually full time. You moved to the UAE to work at Ras Al. How do you even say that?
Ras Al Khaimah.
Ras Al Khaimah. Is it, so that Ras Al Khaimah is like a city, yeah, or it's like a district?
So
What is it?
it's one of the seven emirates. Like they describe them as
Ah,
emirates, so it's one of the seven emirates. It's like
okay.
it borders Oman, so it's the northernmost emirate in the
I see.
country.
Got it. So you moved to the UAE to work there. You spent about a year and a half, and then you moved back to the UK. 2018, you got a third
Yeah.
master's. For people
Yep.
who probably know Surbi, this is not surprising. But for me, who only hold my bachelor's at Stephen's degree, I'm like, how can you study so much?
I
But
just
you got a
I
third.
didn't want to do a PhD.
you, you got a third master's in museum and education, which is quite interesting. And then you've been in the you've been working as an education officer for about 5 years at the Milton Keynes Museum, which is the is it like a local museum, or it's like the museum of Milton Keynes?
So it's got an interesting history. It's not yet the Museum of Milton Keynes. That's what we're working towards.
Oh,
So
okay.
like when I said in my voice note, the two big projects I'm working on right now is moving the
Yeah.
museum towards getting there. At the moment, it's a very strange mix of like social history of Milton Keynes during the Victorian times.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then we're just trying to expand to
Got
make
it.
it like city, sort of city status museum.
Got it. Yeah, if you're interested, you should check out the website. I was going through it. It's quite cute. I'm not cute, man. It's quite interesting. Wherein it's like a small community, and they've I don't know if they've set up the museum, but the museum sort of encapsulate the story of that community on different sort of facets of life. And yeah, I think it's like a at least based on the website, it's like something that families will spend their
Yeah,
weekends or spend holidays
yeah.
and come and do a lot of stuff. Not the typical museum you would imagine, at least what I would imagine, like the
No, it's
Louvre or
definitely
like
no, it's definitely nowhere near being a British museum or the Louvre.
yeah,
In any way, shape, or form. Like we let people touch all of the artifacts and like handle
yeah.
artifacts. So you can go in and like play a musical instrument and we have no issues with it. So you get to experience history essentially, which is really,
Wow.
really interesting approach to museums.
So you've been there for about 5 years now, and yeah, in today's podcast, we're going to be talking about a little bit about Surbhi's journey over the last decade, and maybe some stuff that she's looking forward to in the years to come. A good place to start. We both went to college together. What's your favorite memory from your time at Stephens?
All of it. All I like
You
I
gotta
can't
pick
pick
one.
one. I can't pick one. Oh,
You have to
favorite
pick one.
memory. I think first college fest is probably my favorite memory.
The
But
first college fest.
having said that, I probably shouldn't remember. No, second year, not first year. Second year college
Hmm.
fest. I shouldn't remember much out of it because I got very drunk. But no, I think that's probably out of everything my favorite memory. College trips, the history
Yeah.
department was notorious for having
Yeah.
to organize that in third year. Oh God,
Oh
yeah.
yes, as class rep or history
As
soc
no, as
president, you have
history
to
soc
organize.
president, we had to organize. Yeah, history soc had to organize them. So those were very interesting times. College was just so liberating for me after school. I think yeah, college was such a fun experience overall. I regret not making the most of it. I feel like I didn't make the most of it like some people did, but
Hmm.
it was still like super special.
But what do you think you did not do, which you wished you would have?
I like I think I wish I'd like broken out of the circle I was in and like gone and spoken to a few more people. Like I know so many people I know now, Atikant, Nadeem, like they're so good with making friends outside of that circle and like participating a bit more. I think I
Mm,
stuck to what I knew a little bit, which was probably something I wouldn't do similarly again if I got the chance
mm,
to repeat it. So yeah, just getting to know a few more
got it.
people.
Yeah, college fests were quite the experience. I remember, the day of the fest, they would like music would start playing at like some 9 a.m. and
Exactly.
like dance music, and I'm like, wow,
Copal's
what like
performance
what?
on stage.
Yeah, I think it was the previous episode. I was speaking with Augie,
Oh
and we were
yeah.
talking about minute to win it. Do you remember
Yeah.
minute to win
Yeah,
it?
yeah, yeah. I think that's what I was referring to when I said Copal's performance because she went on stage
Yeah,
and did something silly, didn't
people would
she?
come up and do all kinds of random ass stuff,
Yeah.
and then yeah, like we would just get like cheap thrills
Yeah, to just have the
watching
confidence
that.
to go up on stage and do this. Like, I mean, like, where are you getting this from? And like
Yeah,
looking back, I'm like, why didn't I have the confidence to go up on stage and do this?
yeah. I don't think I ever did any minute to minute, but hats up to the guys who did it.
Exactly.
So college fest, nice. I was listening to another little podcast you did
I did a
one of
podcast.
your with one of your teachers like 5 years ago,
Oh, God, yeah, I
and
forgot about
I
that.
yeah, and I realized through that sort of I learned that you were actually doing science like in
Yes.
class 11,
Oh, God,
and then you
yeah.
took the shift to do history in class 12.
Yeah.
When you were at Stephens, did you know like what was the plan? I mean, from what I remember, you seemed fairly academic and serious into history, or at least that's what people that was your vibe. At least I was roommate with Nadeem, and he cared a lot about your notes.
Nadeem's an idiot.
Um,
That's all I have to say about
so
him.
so what was your plan? Like as you were doing history, did you always know that you were going to go down and do history even more? And like, did this museum stuff, were you aware of it, or did this happen later?
So it's interesting because when I finished, so yeah, so I switched from science to the art stream in
Yeah,
school, and I was like, I am stupid. I should have done this right from the very beginning. I fell under the pressure of, oh, you're good at what you like. You're good at studies. Just you got really good marks in your boards. Do science if you
yeah.
don't know what you want to do. And like history's always come so easy to me. It's just been
Mm,
something I've been interested in. And it just I don't find it tedious in any way. Um, so when I did that, I really wanted to study archaeology for undergrad, and doing that
mm.
in India isn't really an option. I don't know if that's changed in the last 10 years or 13 years,
Why not?
but there aren't really undergrad courses for archaeology. You can do it at a postgrad level. There's a few options here and there, but again, they're very science focused. And the
Mm,
UK has an interesting approach to it where you can do it as a science degree, but you can also do it as an arts degree.
okay.
So I wanted to study archaeology. I got into Durham University for my undergrad, but at the time, my dad had to just sit me down and be like, "Look, without scholarship, there's just no chance we're sending you." So I was like, "Okay, like
Mm,
I understand that if that's not a possibility, it's not a possibility. I'm happy to do. Like I knew I'd get into history in is somewhere in India. Like I'd be able to do that
yeah.
somewhere. So that's why I took up history honors. And Stephens also, like when it happened, I was like umming and eyeing as to whether I wanted to go to Stephens or whether I wanted to go to Hindu. I don't know why I was umming and eyeing, but I was umming and eyeing, and then had to have this conversation with my parents. Had to sit me down and be like, "Are you like what is wrong with you? Why are you even like debating this?" Um, so that is why I ended up doing history. I think
Mm,
at the back of my head, archaeology was always a thing. I was like, I'm really fascinated by this. I want to know more about it. I don't
yeah.
think museums were on my radar at all while I was doing history.
Mm.
But archaeology was always something I was like, I just really, really want to figure out if I can do something with it. Um,
Now
and
when you look back, do you know why you were so fascinated about archaeology, or like what about it?
I don't know why I was fascinated by it without knowing anything about it really, but I can tell
Hmm.
you why I'm fascinated with it now, having done
Yeah.
a few digs. Um, there's some kind of thrill about digging a hole for about 5 days and not knowing what you're going to find,
Hmm.
which is essentially what you're doing. You're digging a hole not knowing what you're going to find. So you can end up finding nothing, which has happened to me. I've dug a hole for 5 days and not found a single thing. You can end up finding the slightest of change in color in soil, which will excite
Mm-hmm.
everybody on site because it means something to them. Or you can end
Mm-hmm.
up finding an entire pot that's not in shards, like it's not broken, it's completely intact, and you're kind of like, how the
Mm-hmm.
hell has this survived for so many hundreds of years?
Yeah.
And like, I've done the thing where I've put my trowel through a full intact pot and broken it while digging, and you're just sitting there going, I've just
Oh,
broken a hundreds of years old object into like little tiny pieces.
do you get
um
fired if you do that?
no, it happens
No.
more often than you realize.
Oh
So
wow.
just, but
Okay.
like the first time I did, I was like, shit. So yeah, archaeology, just like the mystery of it, and then getting to like look at the stuff and just putting it all together and like piecing it together to come up with like a story of what that site meant, what was going on, um, is just really fascinating. And I can't say I
Mm.
know a lot about it because I didn't stick with it.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting watching other people who've really made their life out of this talk about it and kind of put those puzzle pieces together that you're contributing to. So yeah,
Yeah.
really, really interesting.
Yeah. Why didn't you stick with it?
Uh, so mostly it was practical reasons. There was no way I would have ended up getting sponsored for a work visa to stay and work in archaeology,
Mm.
and it doesn't pay enough. So a lot of people, at least in the UK, I don't know what it's like in India. What most people will do here is if they do field work, they do commercial archaeology. So here it's compulsory to do archaeology before you build anything. So even if you're thinking of like
Mm.
redeveloping an area, you have to do archaeology.
Mm.
Even if you're digging like a small test site to see what's underneath, and
Mm.
then so they'll join a commercial unit that goes alongside of these building activities. They do that for
Mm.
about 10-15 years because it's quite like taxing on your body, and then they go on to do other things. So no one really sticks with it long term, unless you then go into academia. So there's lots of like practical
Got it.
reasons why I was like, this doesn't, as much as I really enjoy doing it, it doesn't make sense long term.
Do you see yourself going back at some point in
I'd
the
love to
future?
continue like doing it as a hobby, like on the side, just going on digs and joining digs here and there. I don't think I'll do it professionally.
Hmm. Got it. 100 years from now, when like, so maybe let me phrase it differently. Today we do a lot of digs because in the past a lot of stuff just went under the ground, right? 100 years from now, do you think there would be archaeology? Like, do you think
Oh
people would
yeah,
still be digging? Yeah.
yeah. You people are leaving stuff all the time, right? Like there's just
But won't we
you.
have other ways to just like know what happened in that phase, in that period of time?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, you've got more written record, I guess, but like even with
Yeah.
written record, you've the objects tell you so much more than written record does because you get that real experience of what is going on.
Hmm.
Again, writing is from one person's perspective. They could have just been completely
Yeah.
making stuff up. We're working on like a Roman section in one of our galleries at the moment, and one of my
Hmm.
colleagues is a complete expert in Romans, and she'll just go, "Yeah, but this guy just made this stuff up. Like I know we've got written records of it, but he just made it up." So you're sitting there going, "Okay, so the object's telling us more than this guy's telling us in this whole book that he
I
wrote."
see.
So yeah, I think there's definitely going to be, there might be advances in technology, so we might not be doing it the way we're doing it at the moment.
Yeah.
But seeing and holding those objects, there's something else about it. There's like, you get a different feel for what people were doing. Like seeing a brick with a little child's print on it, or
Hmm.
like an animal's footprint on it, and you're like, oh, this tells you a story that textbooks won't be able to tell you.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Wow.
absolutely.
So you think archaeology will be around 100 years
Yeah,
from now?
yeah. As long as
Interesting.
humans are creating waste, leaving stuff behind.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. So we talked a little bit about the practical reasons why you decided to maybe switch from field work to be more in museums. You started at in while at Durham, at a museum there.
Hmm.
Um, What is the most stressful part about working at a museum? Like breaking the artifacts?
Oh God, managing people, which is I think the most stressful
Yeah.
job in every job really.
Yes, for everybody.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's probably the most stressful job. I work in a relatively smaller museum, but
Hmm.
we're 5 paid members of staff and 200 plus volunteers.
Oh
And
wow.
I'd like some stage in my 5 6 years of working at this place, I have managed volunteers. I continue to do so, not necessarily in the same capacity as I have done in
Yeah.
the past. Like I was saying, my roles changed quite drastically in the 5 years. Even though I still got the title of education officer, I don't really
Yeah.
do that job as much anymore. um, Managing people is the most stressful part, and I hope nobody hears me say this from work, but like, oh my
I'm
god,
sure
it's a
some
tough
people are
job.
hearing.
um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Volunteers are
yeah,
hard. Like they don't report to you. They're
so
not
hard.
paying them. They're just doing out of their goodwill.
They're all
So
lovely people and they have such great intentions. Like the reason they're giving their time to the place is
yeah.
just absolutely amazing to watch.
Mm.
But there's just that dynamic with them being so, and like we allow our volunteers to essentially volunteer in every aspect of the museum. So they are doing everyday
Mm.
maintenance to collections care. Oh, second stressful part at the current moment in the UK, objects going missing after the
Oh, like
British
people just
Museum
steal stuff.
scandal. Thankfully, no one's stealing anything at our place, but there's this whole thing of mislabeling objects or like not putting them in the right place and then not knowing where they've ended up.
Oh.
That's the whole thing. That can be quite stressful. That's the
Well,
current
what is the
situation.
British Museum scandal? I am not aware of this.
Have you not heard this? Oh,
No.
a couple of, I don't know, this might need editing a little bit, but I'm not sure.
It's
A
okay. Just
couple
fact
of
check
months
everything.
ago,
This
few
may not be
months,
100% accurate.
few months ago, they basically discovered that one of their curators was stealing from them. So objects were going missing, and
Mm.
they turned up on eBay, and he was trying to sell them off. And like the scandal is that people were aware of it. So this has been going on for years now. It's only just come out.
Oh.
People were aware of it. No one said anything. So the director of the British Museum had to step down when all of this came out for political reasons.
Of course.
But the extent of it is quite bad.
Wow.
So yeah,
And they eventually end up on eBay and they eventually end up like at auctions where
somewhere.
somebody's going to
Yeah,
pay some money.
which is
Wow.
really silly because that's how he got caught. This person, you can't sell British Museum's objects on
Yeah.
eBay and not think you're not like you're going to get away with it.
Yeah. Wasn't the
But the sad
smartest.
part is he did get away with it for years. So
Right.
yeah,
Wow. Okay, so that's the most stressful part. Managing
yeah,
like all volunteers and people just stealing stuff.
like
In your
objects
museum,
going
you allow
missing.
people to like just like you let people touch the stuff. So it's probably a very
Yeah,
real risk.
I mean,
Or
we
some
still.
kid just goes
Oh
home
yeah,
with it.
absolutely. We've had incidents where we've had people like visitors walk away with stuff that's just sitting out
Yeah.
there for. So we've got volunteers who have to watch spaces, but if it's crowded, you can't stop it. But the way we tackle
Hmm.
it is that we've got a handling collection, which is what people get to handle. So they don't necessarily have to be authentic
Ah,
objects; they can be replica objects. And then we've got our
right.
collection, which you don't get to handle in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll always
Got it.
have like duplicates of stuff that's out.
Got it. Um, One thing you were saying that and that's what you did your second masters in is education and museums. You even when you were in the UAE, you were there to I think build out
The
their
education
education
department.
program.
Yeah,
What does that mean? Like, what does education at a museum mean? I know you were saying that it
good
involves some
question.
stuff like, planning like school, like group tours, and maybe
Yeah.
like workshops at the museum. But talk to me a little bit about what encompasses. You've done a whole master's in it. What does education in museums even look like?
So it means different things in different museums, interestingly, but majority of it is making your museum collection accessible to different audiences. So if I'm working with a
Hmm.
school group, how do I make it relevant to them? So if
Hmm.
it's a 5 year old that's coming in with a school group, does it have to match up with the national curriculum? Do they need to learn certain aspects
Oh.
about this topic that they're doing at the museum? How do we make it so that it isn't overly complicated for them? And then the same goes for people with any sort of disability. So if
Mm.
you're coming in with visual impairment, how do we make an object accessible to you when you're not able to read a text panel? Or if you've got hearing disability, how do we make it so that you can like listen to our volunteers? Like how do we make that
Mm-hmm.
interaction happen? Um, so different audiences figuring out how they interact with museums and how you can make that collection accessible to them.
Mm.
That is a lot of what educators tend to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then making it fun. So, like, if a family is coming in, how do I make an event fun where they enjoy it, they get something out of it, but also they learn something about the museum?
Yeah.
So those are the different things like you have to think about. Now, for the majority of my role in the UAE, I was just dealing with schools.
Mm.
So it was more about making the school sessions fun and like having more encouraging more local people to come to the museums because there people don't really see history the same way.
Yeah.
So I mean, schools weren't an issue. All of these expat schools were like, yeah, we'll come to the museum to do something that's in our curriculum. But then it
Yeah.
was interesting trying to talk to them about the Egyptians when I didn't have any Egyptian artifacts to actually show them.
Mm.
Now that won't happen in usually won't happen in other museums. So like the museum I work for, I'm not talking about the Egyptians if I don't have an Egyptian artifact to talk to you about.
Correct.
But I'll turn an entire experience around the Victorians and make that interactive and fun for you to come and like enjoy for a day.
Mm.
So schools were the big part of what I started off doing, and
Mm-hmm.
school children. Never thought I'd end up in education and with like working with school kids, but like that's evolved now. So now I'm working on exhibitions and figuring out how to make those exhibitions accessible. So words,
Yeah.
cartoons, display of objects, how to make it more tactile. So lots of different
Mm-hmm.
things.
That is so fascinating because I remember as a kid growing up, like I never got the appeal of museums. I remember we
I don't
went
get. I
once went
still
for like
don't.
a
I still hate going to museums. I work in a museum and I still hate going to a museum.
really.
Yeah, I'm the worst person to go to a museum with. I will just power through, and if I don't find it fascinating, that's it. I'm in and out.
Oh man, that was going to be my next question. Like, given that, like now that I've spent some time in, like I've gone to some museums in like Europe, my question to you is like, for somebody who works at a museum, what is the best way to go and experience a museum? Because sometimes like right now, what I try always, like I rarely go to a museum without like a guide or like on
Hmm.
a guided tour or something, right? Otherwise, I'm just like, you go see stuff, maybe you read it, you try and air quotes appreciate the art, but I'm like, I couldn't care less.
Yeah,
This is a really average looking sculpture, but at the same time, when we've been on these like guided tours, they tell you a whole story, and they will connect different things, and that is so much more exciting.
yeah.
So in India, like it has been I remember we went once to the National Gallery or the National
Hmm.
Museum or something. It was so bloody boring. And yeah, like I would never imagine like going to museums being fun, but
Yeah.
like based on the stuff you're doing now, like I could imagine it being quite fun for like school kids to be like, oh, it's gonna be a fun day at the museum.
So yeah, so the behind the scenes of the museum is obviously really fascinating and really fun. And
Mm.
I still struggle with the front of like visiting a museum
Yeah.
side personally as well. So I end up gravitating like any museum that I go to, I end up gravitating to anything interactive. Like
Mm.
whether it's like and a lot of the UK museums are now going that route where they're making sure that they target at different levels. So you could be an
Mm.
academic and still get the same out of it, but you could also be a 5 year old or a family with two
Mm-hmm.
youngsters and still get the same experience out of it. So I will
Mm.
always end up going for the interactive and seeing if the interactive tells me what the text panel is telling me. Guided
Yeah.
tours are a really good way of seeing museums because I just prefer listening to someone tell me a story rather than
Yeah.
reading something. Cases haven't got it right yet, so
Mm.
I remember going to the Met with my mom and my brother, and they're both the
Mm.
sort of people who will read every single label in a museum and
I hate
pretend to
that.
appreciate every single object in a museum. And I basically decided I'm never going to a museum with either of them again.
Yeah.
So
What's
I'm
your
not
favorite
sure I can
museum you've
answer.
been, or which is a museum you would go back to?
When people ask me this, I always say I would love to work at the Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny museum. It's right. It's in the same building as their Natural History Museum. So most people think that's the end of it. That the Natural History Museum is there and that's it. But like you have to just go further back, and it's this one guy's personal collection of objects that he found around the world. It's still got handwritten labels from all of these people who first started the museum, so they've not changed the technique. There's a lot of problems with the way the information is presented because of decolonization of museums and that narrative
Yeah.
that's happening at the moment, and repatriation of objects. So there's a lot of things in there that are problematic. But it's such a fascinating collection. Like I'd love to have that challenge of working with that sort of a collection where, and you can open a, like you can go there multiple times and you'll open a drawer and you'll just be like, I saw this. I mean I opened this drawer last time, but I never saw half of these artifacts in there. And they've not been touched. They've not changed anything. But there's just so much stuff in there that you don't take in everything every
Hmm.
time you go. And it's just cultural stuff from around the world, so you can basically have like a little experience of what was going on around the world during the Victorian times in that little tour of that museum. um like, not to say
Wow.
it's not problematic, it's still quite problematic, but yeah, it's that would be my
Problematic
one
because
place.
they just like plundered all of this stuff from the
Narratives,
colonies.
yeah, yeah, current narratives in the
Hmm.
UK when it comes to collecting and
Got it.
collections, you kind
What
of
do you
have to
think about
acknowledge
that?
that.
Should all the museums return all the stuff they plundered back to the countries?
Uh, I have a slightly more maybe controversial experience coming from a country that was colonized.
Yeah.
I don't think a country like India should be given anything back because they're really not going to look after it.
Hmm.
So I think the British can keep it. At least it's on display. Can they
Yeah.
work with the Indian government to make it more accessible? Sure, but uh, from the care of the object perspective, where is it being
Hmm.
seen more? I think it's being seen more here than it would be in India. And I could
Yeah.
be completely wrong about it. There are certain cultures where I'm like, no, you've got to give this back. Like this means a
Hmm.
lot more to people today in that culture. Like you have to return it.
Hmm.
Um,
What's
so
an example
it
of that?
human remains, like certain human remains that are in possession, things that are
Hmm.
more religiously used still. So there's lots of like artifacts at the Pitt Rivers that are still being used by cultures in the Pacific. That's
Hmm.
part of their ritual life. So for them to have it back, it would still be in use in some way. So if
Yeah.
those are the arguments for having things back, then I think, yeah, please go
Hmm.
ahead and give it. Um, but for India in particular, when we don't know where our national collection is sitting at the moment, I don't see the point of returning any of the
Well, it might
objects.
just be on eBay.
Exactly.
Who knows?
I mean, give it a few days, you never know. They might have erased a whole period of history and gone, this is the real stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's so
yeah.
fascinating. I don't know if you've read 1984 by Orwell, but
I
one of
haven't
the
read it, but I do know the premise.
yeah, I think what was fascinating about history is that I think I can't remember the exact line, but it says something about if you control the past, you control the present, and you control the present, you control the future.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, I don't think we will see it very explicitly, but yeah, I think that there is you have a lot of power if you can control
There's
the
a
narrative
danger
of what
in
has
that.
happened.
Yeah, that narrative change is so easily done. So
Do you
um
see a lot of that in the UK? Like I know India, there's a lot of debate about whether or not that is happening or not. But like since you've been in the UK, since you've been working in archaeology and history, do you see this happening very commonly in other
what
parts of the
takeover
world?
of narrative?
Yeah, just rewriting narrative or like rewriting history.
I haven't noticed like there's a little bit of debate here about changing narratives and possibly rewriting history when it comes to like colonization and
Mm,
enslavement. I think those are the two things where there is a little bit of a struggle.
mm,
It's not necessarily happening in the same way it possibly could happen in India if it's not already happening. But
mm,
the way it's happening here is that the community that's gone through the enslavement or the
mm,
colonization want a certain shift in narrative. And
Mm.
sometimes the solution for the shift in narrative is to completely get rid of the narrative.
Mm.
So it's interesting. Like, I don't think even
Mm.
here they found a balance of how to kind of be able to tell that story without it becoming an issue for everybody. So it's either
Mm.
one way or no way. So either you just have it the way it was originally, or you just get rid of it. So all of the statue wars that were happening a few years ago
Mm.
still continue to become a problem. This, like,
Mm.
getting rid of the statues, fine, you've got rid of the statues, but like alongside of that, you've gotten rid of that entire storyline. Like, you're not talking about anything. You're not talking about what was problematic with that story. You're not talking about
Yeah.
background of the story. So you've just completely said no, we
Yeah.
don't talk about this. So I think that's what the UK is struggling with.
Mm. Yeah.
But there's a lot of effort to kind
Uh.
of get in more perspectives, and a lot of effort to
Yeah.
try and bring in storylines that are not as visually weren't as prevalent in the past.
Yeah.
So
Complicated topic. Indeed.
extremely.
Anyway, let us talk about something light. After all of that,
No.
over the last 6 months, what has been a good investment you've made? And by that I mean money well spent, like totally materialistic, like
My
no,
kickboxing
no, like
classes.
you do kickboxing.
I started 5 months ago. So yes, my kickboxing
What made you
classes
start?
are.
What made you start doing
I
kickboxing?
was feeling like I've always been active, so I've always been into sports. Growing up, I roller skated at national level, so I've always been into
Oh, I
sport.
don't know that.
A lot of people in college actually don't know that because I stopped after school. Um, so I'd gone through like a 6 month period where I was feeling lazy, lethargic. I wasn't doing anything active, and I was like, I just need to get myself in gear and like do something. And I ended
Yeah.
up just like walking past this youth center that's 5 minutes down the road from me. That's always been there,
Hmm.
and I just haven't bothered to
Yeah.
check. And my brother was doing kickboxing, and he just in passing said, I think you'd be good at it if you find somewhere that you can like go. And when I saw the
Hmm.
classes advertised, I was like, you know what, I'll give it a shot. So
Hmm.
yes, I those are definitely worth it.
And it's been 5 months. Do you see
It's been
yourself
five
doing it for
months
another
Yeah,
another
I
five
see.
months?
Yeah, I'm grading next month, so I'm getting my belt next month, hopefully. So I see
Wow.
myself doing it for as long as I can carry it on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah. Usually, people, the most common answers to this question, it's a fairly new question on the podcast, has been things like going to the gym and spending on
materials.
holidays. I still haven't got one like just consumerist like material.
Just
I love
consumer.
my
I
phone,
probably could
or like
think
I
of.
love this fucking keyboard I bought. I don't know.
See, I'm not. I'm not usually like I'll spend money, but I don't really care about material things in the same way. So like I'm not saying
Hmm.
I don't have nice things. Like yes, my phone is a fairly expensive phone, but like do I care about it that much? Like
Hmm.
no. I would have said something along the lines of like an art supply that I bought. But which I haven't done in the past
Oh.
6 months. So like again, I
Okay.
couldn't say that. But that would normally be
Yeah.
the things I like really enjoy spending money on.
Yeah. And if you had unlimited money, what would you buy yourself tomorrow?
Then I take myself on a holiday.
A holiday.
Then I take myself on a really nice holiday.
Okay.
Um,
So
Actually,
that's the that'll be answer.
I really want to go and like spend some time scuba diving.
Hmm.
Like I think that's the next thing on my agenda is just take a break and go scuba dive for a while.
Hmm.
So if I had unlimited money, that's probably where I'd invest it.
Do you have a license, like a diving? Have you
Yes,
gotten your
yeah,
diving
yeah. So
license?
I got my
Oh,
advanced
nice.
license a few years ago. So I go here and there. I've not done it like seriously enough to be great at it, but
I
every
see.
time I'm on a holiday where I can go, I usually do tend to go.
Oh, wow. That's so nice. Southeast Asia, apparently, I've heard has some
Oh, it's
great dive
beautiful.
sites.
Yeah, it's
Um,
gorgeous.
so if you ever are in this part of the world,
End up
um,
coming there. Yeah.
Indonesia, Philippines, even I
Mm.
think Thailand, they have some pretty
Yeah, Thailand's beautiful.
kick-ass
That's where I got my
dive sites
that's where I got my certification.
license. Oh, nice. Okay, let's talk a little bit about your time in the UAE. You spent about a year and a half there.
Yeah.
When you were working there, what was like the biggest difference you noticed? This was, of course, many years ago. So this was pre 2018. This is around
Yes.
2016 to 2018, a while ago. The Middle
Yeah,
East is like a
2016.
crazy area now. my sister is currently like works in Dubai,
Oh
and
yeah.
I've been hearing great things. I'm curious to know what your experience was. How was it like different from say working in the UK? What do you like the
I
most? What
mean,
do you like the least?
the biggest thing about working in a museum in the Middle East was the amount of money they have. Museums
Of course.
here are constantly struggling for money. Like we're constantly begging for money. We're just like, we don't
Yeah.
have it. And they just had so much money to give on this museum. They did end up giving it. That's a different story.
Yeah.
But like they had, when I was working there, the Louvre had opened. They were working on a partnership with the British Museum for for a brand new museum that they were bringing in. They were talking about the Guggenheim coming in. So like the investment in museums was just absolutely unheard of and insane to me. That was probably the starkest difference that I found. Um,
Hmm.
but then just general day-to-day stuff, work cultures are completely different in the UAE. And then working for like a government setup, it's yeah. I'm not saying people aren't lazy here, but people are incredibly lazy there. Like such a slow pace of life, do the bare minimum. And like I just wasn't used to that kind of set. I still am not used to that kind of setup. I don't think I could work in an environment where people are so laid back about work. I don't know what it says about me, but that was probably really difficult to cope with.
Says you're a workaholic.
I'm trying to be better
No.
at it.
Do you think it's changed? I know that like Dubai wasn't like, at least like Dubai is just as a as an example, or as a broad generalization of what's happening in the Middle East. A lot has changed. Like F1's now in the Middle East. They're doing so much to make the Middle East like a cultural center. Like I
Yeah.
follow like crypto and the world of finance. That's like booming in the Middle East. Do you think that has changed, or would you imagine that has changed over the
I
last maybe 7 8 years?
I think it when I had moved there, that's where the focus was shifting to. So I'd seen that initial stage of the shift in focus because there was a
Yeah,
lot of talk about we need to make this a cultural tourist place. Like we need to, and they were
correct.
prepping for the 2020 Expo, so there was a lot of new build happening, and like every single emirate was working towards that, regardless of how much money they had. So you had
Yeah.
all these big expansions culturally happening in Abu Dhabi. You had these big archaeological projects happening in around the UAE, and they were just trying any way possible to turn any site that they had, museum, brand new museum, existing archaeological site, like they were turning everything into a cultural opportunity. So I've seen that, like the start of that, and to me it's obviously expanded. I haven't been back in 7 years, so I have no
Yeah.
idea how big it's gotten like in reality. But now I'm hearing from people that there's a museum in every corner of Dubai. Like they've got at least four new
Wow.
places that they've opened up. So yeah, definitely has changed in that sense.
Europe seems to me as like the pinnacle of what museums and like being involved in I would say in the business of history.
Yeah.
Um, do you think that that is going to continue, or do you see like places like Dubai or maybe like India or the US? I don't know if it's that big, but do
I
you
think
see
India
that
has the
shifting
potential to
away?
doing it. India has a lot of potential of doing it, and we could do it really well. I just don't think there's the investment there at the moment. The Middle East, if you're talking about the UAE and like places like Saudi in particular, they'll do it really well because they'll spend a lot of money in it, but a lot of it is so manufactured.
Yeah.
And knowing the background of the way they create these stories and what they sell to the public, I have a little bit of an issue with it. So yes, they'll do it really well. They are doing it really well. Um, but it's not authentic. It won't ever be the same sort of experience that Europe sells you.
Yeah.
There's a level of authenticity that you find in Europe that you're like, I'm here, this feels natural, this feels
Yeah.
like it's meant to be here. The UAE, everything sort of feels out of place.
Yeah. Singapore
Like,
gets that criticism sometimes. It's like it's a new country. It's a very
but
young
it is a new
country.
country, right? Like, the Middle
Yeah.
East isn't a it's not a new territory. But the
Yeah.
narrative that they sell and the way they sell it makes it sound like I would get it from, like, I get where Singapore has a problem with
Yeah.
getting that sort of criticism. I understand that. Like, they don't
Correct.
have an option. Um,
Correct.
I worked on a site in the UAE which was a completely abandoned pearl fishing village. And
Mm-hmm.
they were doing a lot of archaeological work. There's really interesting stuff. The buildings and the structures were more or less intact.
Mm-hmm.
And pearl fishing had died out. And this village, essentially, at one point in history, I still don't know why, had all packed up and moved out. So they'd all
Mm-hmm.
abandoned the place all at once. Now, there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
political reasons why this had happened, which is why most people don't know what the real reasons behind it were. They plan to restore all of the buildings or majority of the buildings in there. The plan on the project was to convert a lot of them into hotels, to turn them into like little boutique hotels to have this sort of experience,
Mm-hmm.
which is all great, but you're not admitting to the real history of the place. They weren't going to talk
Mm-hmm.
about experiences like pearl diving, the problems behind it, the history of it in the same detail that I would have liked. And it would have
Yeah.
turned into a tourist hotspot just for people to come and be like, oh, I went and stayed in this little place where, it was all very historic.
Yeah.
um that's the sort of stuff I've got a little bit of an issue with. And that's probably
Mm-hmm.
just me with my background. Most people will just be like, oh, it's a great experience, go and let's do this.
Yeah.
um but with the kind of stuff we've got in India, there's so much, but like so much more we can do with it.
Mm.
So
Yeah. Yeah. The museums in Europe are just like wow. Like I remember when I first time my first visit to the Vatican and seeing those
hmm.
museums, I was like, my God, like this is just like next level altogether, right? But yeah, I think for newer countries who I think catching up, I think there's always that balance on like
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it has to be sustainable, like so somebody has to
Hmm.
pay for it, and
Exactly.
I think Europe has been doing it for a very long time, so they've
They
found a
have.
very elegant way of monetizing all of those museums. I
Yeah.
mean, it
And
must be
they're
really,
dealing with
really,
other
really
issues now.
expensive. Yeah, to keep those museums up and running, like they're not. I don't think they're cheap. Like they are
They're not.
bloody, bloody
I
expensive
mean,
to
we're
run
going
them.
through a phase at the moment where the money from the museum bank account is just going out and barely
Yeah,
anything is
nothing's
coming
coming in.
in. So we're all just sitting there going, are we going to get paid next month?
Yeah.
Because I mean, we've got two massive expansion projects that we're working on. So everything is
Hmm.
expensive. Laying a floor in the gallery is so expensive. So,
Yeah. But I think if done well, like I see, like when we visit these museums, yeah, tickets etc. are not cheap, right? And you
hmm.
see the lines of people showing up. I'm like, I think when I want some, I think the Vatican or something. And I was looking at the line. I'm like, man, this
Yeah,
museum is like a, they
it's
probably
huge.
do like
Like,
$1 million of revenue every single
just through
day.
people paying,
Looking at
yeah,
the, yeah, just looking at those lines of people standing and trying to get in and paying,
in the
whatever,
heat, in the
15, 20,
rain.
30 euros. Yeah, amazing. Um, okay, so that was the UAE, and then of course you're back in the UK since 2018. 10 years from now, what do you think you're going to be doing? Are you still going to be in the world of museums? Are you still going
That's
to
a
be in the
very
UK?
difficult one. That's a very difficult one to answer at the moment. I go
What would you like
from
it to be?
I can quit my I would love to just be able to have enough money to go and travel the world for a bit.
Of course.
I would, yeah. I think I'd like to stay in the world of museums to some extent.
Hmm.
Now, what capacity that will be in, I'm not 100% sure on at the moment. Whether
Mm.
I'd want to like take a step back and just do a bit of freelance work here and there or consulting work in the museum field at some stage. Um, Maybe run a museum one day. I don't know. That sounds very hectic. I'm not prepared for that just yet. But why not? But yeah, I think I've been in the place I've been in for a very long time. So I definitely am in the mood for a bit of a change.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, for visa reasons and all of those things,
correct.
I'm tied down a little bit. But it it shouldn't be too long before I can explore other options. So I'll go wherever it takes me. But
Nice.
ideal world,
Yeah,
if I can, maybe just like take a break.
you'll be surprised at how many people who
Say
live
that they want
outside
to take a
India
break.
say this, and the only constraint is like the visa life. I
Yeah,
mean, that's
I'm
that's uh,
close. I'm
that's
very
part of
close.
reality. You're
Yeah.
very close. This is close to like residency, yeah, or like
Yes.
citizenship.
Well, both actually, because once you
Oh,
get your
okay.
residency, you're not that far from getting your citizenship.
Nice.
So,
So that's the plan.
yeah, that is the plan. All going well,
Wow.
and the UK government not fucking it up.
Well, fingers crossed.
Yeah,
Hopefully everything goes. But based on whatever we've spoken, I think if you did start a museum, I think that would be pretty cool. Like if you
start a
somehow
museum.
acquired
My
some,
dad keeps saying
yeah,
that. He's like, "Why don't you start a
yeah,
museum?" I'm like, where am I
I
supposed
think
to
it would
get
be
all
really,
these
really cool.
objects from?
I mean, you source the objects, you sort of create some experiences based on anything you've like everything you've said so far. Like I would surely like to visit a museum run by you. Like
I think
it'd
I
be
yeah,
fun.
I'd be happy to take over an existing museum that needed like a
Mm,
little bit of TLC and take it somewhere, like, having learned from all of these experiences, maybe take it
yeah.
somewhere new. And I get to do a little bit of that with my current job, which is really, really fun to do.
Hmm.
But that would be a really cool project. I don't know if I can start a museum from scratch. Like that just seems a
Mm.
little bit yeah, I don't know what sort of museum I'd start, but definitely take a little museum that needs some love
Yeah,
to a
it
different
almost
place.
sounds like like in the world of private equity, like private
Mm,
equity companies will usually buy out a company,
yeah,
and they would run it for like 5 6 years. Their main goal is to like double the value or like
take
double
it to
shareholder
yeah,
returns. And then once they're there, they would just like sell the company. And as a part of the process, they usually get new management. They fire the existing management and
yeah,
like rehaul the
yeah.
company just enough so that they can pass it over to the
Then
next owner. But yeah, I think if museums are running out of money, this is a great way to somebody should just start like a private equity fund for museums wherein they bring in people like you, rehaul the museum for 2 3 years, run it, and then once in a good
and they're
spot,
just like, okay,
bye
bye.
bye.
Yeah.
Yeah, they move on to the next one. I think it would be pretty
Well,
cool.
you never know. Who
um,
knows what's going to happen in the next like 5 years in the museum world? So like,
yeah.
everybody's struggling for cash, so that could be the next step.
Yeah. Yeah, I think everybody, like not even museum, like just companies in general are struggling for
Yeah,
cash. But
yeah.
I think that would be pretty cool. And London seems like the place that this could happen. Like it is a good intersection of history and finance. So based on
See,
what I've
that's
seen, museums, I think
the
they're a great
problem.
business.
It might not happen in London because a lot of the London museums are run by people's taxes, which is why they're free. So
Oh,
London might not be the place that it happens, but there's
I see, I
enough
see.
potential in the UK for this to happen. There's enough
Yeah.
museums. Like there's a museum in every corner in the UK. Even
Hmm.
the smallest of cities will have a little museum that is one room
Yeah.
with a few text panels on the wall and a couple of pictures, and they'll call it a museum. So definitely potential there.
Yeah, and I'm sure like it's a like if it's bleeding money, it's a burden on state finances, right? Like you have to keep it afloat, and somebody could make it like a revenue generator that hey generates revenue for the community, and it's a fun thing. Like Singapore like lives on that. Singapore's taken like they've basically made an artificial garden, and people pay $40 to go and like look at those gardens, right? And
Wow.
it's great. So it is possible, and it's like a big I don't know. I think that would be quite fascinating. Anyway, let's move on. Totally a random tangent. Okay, since we are almost at the hour, Survi, as you look back over the last 10 years, I'm curious to know if you've had any shifts in belief. And by a shift in belief, I mean something you would believe very strongly, say when you were still in university, but now, 10 years on, you've taken like a 180-degree shift in that belief.
I'm sure there is, but there isn't anything significant enough that's coming to mind. So there must not be anything that's like, or maybe it's just like I've always been a very easygoing person. And like that doesn't mean that I've never had strong beliefs,
Mm,
but I can't think of anything that I've like fully gone back on and been like, no, I don't know. Yeah, that's wow.
even a small one.
I can't even think of a small one. Like one of my biggest ones has been I don't see myself moving back. Never say never. That's the
Mhm.
one thing I've learned. Like I think before a certain time in my phase, I would be very like quick to say no, that's never gonna happen.
Mm,
But life's taught me to never say never. So that would be
I
one
see.
where I've kind of gone, yeah, okay, I'll accept it. Like there'll be curveballs that'll come my way that I have absolutely no control over.
Do you remember what? Do you remember a series of events or?
Yeah, yeah,
why
yeah. It was
that shift happened.
it's the experience that I had in the UAE essentially.
Ah.
So I remember going to the UAE as or to Dubai in 2010, just on a family holiday, and
Mm-hmm.
absolutely not enjoying the experience. Like it just wasn't my
Mm.
type of place. I did not like it, and I both
Yeah.
my mom and I are very similar people when it comes to things like this. And I remember, and 2010 is a long time ago, but I have a distinct memory of turning to her and just being like, I don't ever want to come back here. And she's like, no, me either. I don't ever want to come back here. Within 6 months of each other, we were both back in the country, and we were both working there.
And
And
this
I
is
was
when
like,
you move to UAE to work.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
And independent of each other. She got a job opportunity 6 months before I did.
Yeah.
And it was something that both her and dad talked about. And they were like, yep, it sounds like something you should go and experience. 6 months later, I got a job and I was like, I don't have any other
Wow.
option. I'm coming there. Um,
What was that conversation with your mom like? Hey, remember we said we'd never go back to Dubai? Well,
yeah, I
turns
mean,
out I'm coming too.
we still talk about it. We're like, that was such a bizarre experience. Like, how both of those things happened. And I think particularly more so for her, but also
Hmm.
like I was the only one on my cohort in Durham that applied for that job and ended
Hmm.
up getting it. And like
Mm-hmm.
the UAE was nowhere on my radar. Like I didn't even know where Asal Khema was before that job came up. I was looking at other places, but I was looking mainly in Europe to see where I could go. And once I
Yeah.
like, and at that point, I was literally applying for anything and everything. So when we both ended up there, we were just like, "Hey, what the hell just happened?" And when we both left, we were like, "What the hell just happened?" Like,
Do you
nothing
still
like
say
it
now that
worked
you
out,
never
but
go
then it
back?
didn't work out. So I
Do,
do
do,
tend to
do,
say that I will not, like, if
hmm.
given the opportunity and if it's in my hands, I won't move back. But I've
Yeah.
also learned that I should not say I will never move back. So you never know. I might have to end up there for whatever reason, but I will I
Yeah.
be happy about it? No.
Interesting.
So
Well, never say never.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, that's probably
Tax
the one.
free is a great thing.
Tell me about it.
Especially living in the UK. Okay, as you look back, two pieces of advice you would have for, say, 18-year-old Surbhi.
uh, don't stress too much. It'll all work out. Be a bit more open.
Hmm.
Be a bit more like take yourself out of your comfort zone.
Hmm.
Yeah, those will be the two things.
Nice. Okay. After all the questions I've asked you, uh, before we wrap up, you get to ask me one question.
Oh,
What do you have? What do you have for me?
oh God. Okay. I think you're getting where like what's happening in your life in 5, 10 years from now. Where do you see yourself?
5 years from now,
Yeah, five, ten.
surely, hopefully, surely doing the podcast.
Yeah,
But
still going through the 1,500 people you've got on your list.
still going through the 1500. Yeah, lots of people to go through. 5 years from now, I actually, so that's a big, I would say, dilemma right now, in my mind. And the dilemma is between two sort of options. Option one is life 5 years from now sort of looks quite similar to life today.
Okay.
And life today is not bad by any means of imagination. Life now
Yeah.
is great, right? But life 5 years, 10 years from now looks fairly similar. Some things which I would like to achieve, whether it be at work or like say health and things like that. I get to those milestones, I get to those goals, and you know, broadly life is quite similar. The other dilemma, or the option two, is life 10 years, maybe 5 years is a bit too early, maybe not. Looks very very different from it now. Like it's almost unrecognizable. And a few things which make me think about that, like we've been out of college since for 10 years, right? I don't know about yourself, but for me, like life before college and life after college is like black and white. Like I think it's a big shift.
Yeah.
Before college, we were growing up in a small town. I mean, not very small, like it was, it's still NCR, but you never imagined about living abroad. Or
Mm.
I remember when I came to Stephen's, this Oxford stuff, like you'd only heard that Oxford was a place, and then like the smartest and the brightest people in the world went there, and you're like, how the fuck, like I would never even like go there, right? But you, I think, in college, like you would aspire, that became, it was still hard, but that was within like
It was a
reach.
little bit, yeah, closer to
So
reality.
yeah, you knew people who went there.
Hmm.
You knew people who were trying to get there. Very different. So I think college was that big inflection. And then 10 years later, I feel like there've been many things. But I feel over the last few years, life sort of has, like I would say, like stabilized. Like you've been in
Hmm.
the same place for about a few years. You're roughly in the same industry. Of course, you're getting better every year, but you're kind of there. And the question is that you've actually just been 10 years out from the previous pivotal like shift. And like if we are all lucky, we're probably going to be around for another like 20, 30, 40 years. So then that leaves you with a choice. Do you or would you like to make a next pivotal shift, right? And
Hmm.
that could be things like you go back to school, you study something absolutely different. You go, I don't know, go live in some absolutely different place in the world. It is all possible, right? And I think it is a choice. You can choose to you know
Stick
have
with
the
the
next 10 years look
comfortable.
very similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, stick with what it is. And again, there's nothing wrong with
There's nothing wrong
today,
with it.
but
Absolutely.
there is a possibility that it could look very different. So I don't know, that's
You've
what
not
I'm dealing
decided where
with
it's
today.
going. Yeah.
Yeah. Like for example, things like more tactically, you see like things like AI and all, right? None of us knew AI would ever exist when we were in
Yeah.
university, but the fact is that it exists today. Maybe some of us are trained or like
Hmm.
capable to work in that kind of industry, but a lot of us are not. And then the question is, do you want to go and get trained to learn work in the industry or not?
Jump
Right?
on
That's a
that.
very like
Yeah.
specific example, but it could apply to different aspects of life. So yeah, to answer your very simple question of what life looks 5 years from now, it can either be very similar or it can be look very different. I do not know, but I
Yeah,
think one thing
I think
probably.
that's true for most of us. I think most of us are at that sort of crossroads at the moment where we're kind of like, do we mix things up a little bit, make it like throw ourselves out
Yeah,
there and do something completely different, or do we stick to what we're enjoying it clearly, so stick to what we've got.
yeah, and it is quite random how we landed up here, right? I think most people who've been
Yeah,
on the spot would never imagine that you would be doing this 10 years now. So it's
yeah.
not that we had planned to be here. It just happened, right? um, so yeah, I don't know where. I'll be quite keen to know 10 years from now what everybody on the podcast. I
I
will
think you're gonna
surely
have to
get
do this
back.
all over again. You're gonna have to
I'm
start again
100% going
with
to
the
do this.
people and see where they're at 10 years from now, because it's
Yeah,
really
maybe when i'm when
fascinating.
i'm when I'm just tired of interviewing new people, I'll just go all the way to the start.
Yeah,
I think Arjun was the first episode. Maybe he'll be 40 by then.
yeah.
And be like, hey, what have you been up to in the last 30 years? Are you still at Bain? Are you still
Where
working in
have you
consulting?
ended up
I
exactly?
don't think you would, but yeah. Okay, awesome. With that, I think this is a good place to wrap up. Surbhi, for people who want to get in touch and who've enjoyed listening to this, and they're like, "Hey, we want a little bit more," and I want to like call Surbhi up or like speak to her. How's the best way people should reach you? Is it LinkedIn, Instagram?
Yeah,
How
LinkedIn,
best?
Instagram, still got Facebook, but those are the only you like
Still got
ways.
Facebook.
Yeah,
How often do you
if
check your
people are using.
Facebook?
Well, I use it for work surprisingly quite a lot.
Interesting.
We've got a demographic of following that only does Facebook, so
Wow.
that's what that's used for. But no, I don't. There's like, but it's there for people who want to use it.
Well,
Um,
yeah.
Instagram probably will be the easiest one that I check on a more regular
Okay.
basis. LinkedIn, nothing's happened in my professional life for the last like 5 years for me to need to like constantly check it or update it. So it's there,
Yeah.
but it's not really being used in its possible capacity at the moment. Um,
Okay.
but watch this space in another couple of years, maybe.
Yeah, we'll see a post. I'm excited to announce something.
Yeah.
Oh fucking hell!
Well, I
There's
hope
LinkedIn
so. I
posts.
hope so. I could do with a little bit of change, I think. So,
Yeah. Well, we've been at it for 5 years. 5 years is a long time. It's half a
yeah.
decade.
Yeah.
Okay, so Instagram is the best. You'll find all the links and details in the show notes. And if you're keen, you can also, I also send out a newsletter where all of this stuff is also sent to your emails. So if you want, you can also, of course, always subscribe. Okay, with that, we shall wrap it up. Surbhi, thank you again for making time. I know it's 9 a.m., almost 10:30
It's 10:30
a.m. on
now.
a Saturday morning. So I apologize for getting you up so early,
No, it's been
but
great
it
catching
was a
up.
pleasure
Thank you
and
so
it was
much for
super
having
fun.
me.
I now know two people in the entire world who work at museums.